St. Aria was the kind of village people passed through without much notice. Nestled between green hills and cobblestone roads, its charm lay not in riches or monuments, but in the rhythm of its life. At dawn, the farmers led their oxen into the fields. By noon, the market square filled with chatter, bread steaming in baskets, herbs hanging from stalls, children darting between carts. And when evening shadows stretched across the tiled roofs, the people turned toward the church on the hill, as they had for centuries. What tied this little village together was not the market nor the fields, but a sound, deep, steady, unmistakable. The bell of St. Aria's Church. Cast 200 years earlier by a master craftsman whose name no one remembered, the bell had a voice that carried miles across the valley. Its toll marked births and funerals, harvest festivals and wedding days, war's end and plague's survival. To the people it was more than metal. It was faith itself, reminding them that heaven still watched, that prayers were still heard. Father Michael often said, "The bell does not call us to God. It reminds us He is already here." Every evening at exactly 9 the bell tolled. Mothers tucked children into bed at its sound, shopkeepers bolted their shutters, and the old men sitting by the fountain muttered their final stories before drifting home. Routines sacred and unbroken. Until that night. It was the feast of St. Helena, one of the holiest nights of the year. The church glowed with candles. Families filled the pews, singing hymns that echoed under the tall stone arches. Father Michael, in his white cassock, raised the Eucharist with steady hands. He was a man in his early 40s, weathered by service but still bearing the calm strength of conviction. His voice carried warmth even when speaking of sin. When the service ended, the congregation waited for the bell. It was tradition, 12 slow tolls at midnight, announcing the saint's feast to heaven and earth alike. The sacristan, young Peter, climbed the spiral staircase to the belfry, just as he always did. The rope hung from the great wheel above, thick and coarse, worn smooth by centuries of hands. He grasped it, braced his feet and pulled. Nothing. He frowned, tugged harder. Still nothing. No echo, no shiver of metal, no vibration in the air. The rope gave way with a slackness that felt wrong, as if it were no longer connected to anything. The silence pressed heavy against his ears. Down below, the villagers waited. 1 second passed, then 2, then 10. A murmur rippled through the churchyard. "Why hasn't it rung?" someone whispered. An old woman clutched her rosary. Another crossed herself nervously. Peter stumbled back down the stairs, pale-faced. "Father," he gasped. "The bell, it won't ring." Father Michael's brows knit. He strode up the stairs himself, heart pounding with something he couldn't name. In the belfry, moonlight cut across the bell's surface. It hung as always, massive and still, no crack, no shift. The rope was intact, yet when he pulled, it moved without weight, like a snake shed of its skin. And the bell stayed silent, stubborn as stone. The priest stood there for a long moment, listening to the unnatural quiet. Not even the night insects chirped. It was as if the entire world held its breath. When he returned to the congregation, his face gave nothing away. "The bell has fallen silent tonight," he told them calmly. "Go home and rest. We shall have it repaired." But unease spread faster than reassurance. The villagers whispered in huddles. "The bell has never failed. What does it mean? Is it a sign?" The word curse hissed on some lips before morning came. That night, St. Aria slept poorly. Dreams were haunted by silence. And for the first time in living memory, the valley woke without the voice of the bell to greet the dawn. Father Michael sat alone in the rectory, staring at the candle flickering on his desk. He tried to steady his thoughts. Bells did not fall silent on their own. There was always a reason: rope, wheel, metal. Something could be fixed. And yet, what he saw in the belfry did not feel like rust or breakage. It felt deliberate. He recalled the look in Peter's eyes, wide with fear. The whispers in the congregation. St. Aria was a village bound by faith, but faith was fragile. If people believed the bell was cursed, fear would spread like wildfire, consuming trust, consuming truth. No, he told himself, there are no curses. Only men and what men do in darkness. But even as he whispered the words, Father Michael could not shake the sound that haunted his memory, the sound that should have been there, the toll that never came. Silence can be louder than any bell. And in that silence, something waited. Something he would have to face. The morning after the bell's silence, St. Aria felt different. Market still opened, bread was still baked, but the air was heavy with unease. Every passerby glanced up at the church tower, as if expecting the bell to shatter the quiet at last. But the tower stood mute against the sky, a giant that refused to speak. In the tavern, farmers argued over mugs of ale. "It's a warning," muttered old Garrick, who claimed to remember omens in his youth. "God's telling us something is wrong here." "Nonsense," replied young Tomas, though his voice trembled. "It's just a rope or rust. Bells don't curse people." "Don't they?" Garrick shot back. "You weren't here the year the plague came. The bell tolled night and day for the dying, and then it cracked. A week later, the fever took half the valley. Rumors gathered like storm clouds. Some swore the devil himself had climbed the tower and pressed his hand against the bronze, silencing it. Others whispered that the bell had grown weary of human sin and refused to call them to worship anymore. Mothers clutched their children tighter, telling them not to play near the churchyard after dark. By evening, the fear had a name: the cursed bell. Father Michael heard it everywhere. He walked the square, speaking calmly, assuring people the bell was no more cursed than the cobblestones beneath their feet. But the more he reassured, the less they listened. Fear was easier to believe than patience. That night, as he lit the candles for Vespers, Peter the sacristan hovered nearby, shifting from foot to foot. "Father," the boy blurted, "what if the bell really is cursed?" Michael fixed him with a steady gaze. "Peter, bells are made of bronze and sweat. They don't curse, they don't bless. Men do that. Do you understand?" Peter nodded, though his eyes betrayed doubt. "Yes, Father." But when the service ended and the silence fell once again over the valley, Michael saw the way his flock avoided his eyes, slipping quickly into the shadows of their homes. Faith, he realized, was not just prayer. It was sound, rhythm, repetition. Without the bell, even faith wavered. 3 nights passed. Still no sound. Michael climbed the tower each evening, testing the rope, the wheel, the clapper. All intact. He struck the bell with his own hands, and though the bronze vibrated faintly under his palm, no sound spilled from it, as if the air itself swallowed the noise. On the 4th night, when the moon was high, Michael thought he saw something new. By lantern light, he leaned close to the inner curve of the bell. Scratches. Not the usual wear of centuries, but marks carved deliberately, thin, curved, forming a shape that prickled memory. He brushed his fingers over them. A symbol. It was faint, almost erased, yet clear enough. A circle intersected by a cross, like a wheel broken at its center. Michael froze. He had seen this symbol before, though not in the church. Where? His mind searched, turning pages of memory. Then it struck him, on a gravestone years ago, when he had blessed the burial of a merchant who had vanished mysteriously before being found lifeless near the river. That symbol had been chiseled into the stone, though no mason admitted to carving it. The priest's stomach tightened. Why would such a mark appear inside the bell? And why now? Meanwhile, fear grew bolder. Families avoided Mass, whispering that prayers were useless without the bell to carry them. Some refused to cross the church threshold. By the week's end, only half the pews were filled. At the tavern, Garrick's voice rose again. "Mark me, neighbors. That bell was silenced by hands unholy. The church hides something from us." Tomas argued, "What proof do you have?" "The proof is in your ears, boy. No toll, no chime, only silence. Accursed silence." Michael heard of this outburst from Peter and his heart sank. Faith was unraveling faster than he could mend it. That night he prayed alone in the nave. "Lord, give me strength. If there is truth hidden in this silence, let me find it." His voice echoed against the stone, unanswered. But even as he prayed, a thought gnawed at him. Maybe the silence itself was the answer. The next morning, Michael went to see the blacksmith, Jonas, who had long tended the bell's upkeep. Jonas was a man of iron hands and blunt speech. When Michael told him about the strange silence, Jonas frowned deeply. "I've mended that bell since my father's time. No metal breaks without a crack, no clapper stiffens without rust. If it won't sing, then something else is binding it. Not iron. Not rope. Something unseen." Michael hesitated, then asked, "Do you know this mark?" He sketched the circle and cross symbol on the blacksmith's table with a piece of chalk. Jonas stared, jaw tightening. He crossed himself quickly, almost nervously. "Where did you see that?" "Inside the bell." The blacksmith's eyes darkened. "Then God help us all. That mark should have stayed in the ground with the dead. That night, Father Michael stood again at the tower's base, lantern in hand, staring upward into the dark silhouette of the bell. The people feared curses. But he now feared something worse, that the silence was no act of heaven but of men. A secret clawing its way back into the light. The whispers of curses were only the beginning. The truth would be far heavier. The belfry had always been a place of reassurance for Father Michael. From its windows he could see the entire valley stretched out like a painting. The river glinting under sunlight, smoke curling gently from chimneys, children chasing each other across fields. The bell itself had been his companion since boyhood, a faithful giant that answered his hands with sound as sure as the sunrise. But now when he climbed the spiral stairs the air felt colder. Each step echoed too loudly, as though the tower itself disliked his presence. At the top, the bell loomed in the shadows, mute, massive, defiant. It no longer felt like a servant of God. It felt like a sentinel guarding something. Michael brought a lantern close, letting the orange glow lick across the bronze. The strange mark he had seen days before stood out clearer now, the circle crossed like a broken wheel. It was carved deep, deliberate, not the scratch of time. His fingers traced it again and a shiver crawled through him. He remembered Jonas the blacksmith's words, that mark should have stayed in the ground with the dead. But what did it mean? And who had carved it inside the bell, where no ordinary hand would think to mark? The following Sunday, attendance at Mass dwindled further. Barely a third of the pews were filled. Even the faithful who came bowed their heads nervously, as if afraid to look at the altar. Michael's voice carried across the nave, but without the bell's toll to frame the service, it felt hollow, unfinished. Afterward, he overheard whispers outside the church gates. "It's the priest's fault. He angered the saints." "No, it's the bell itself. It wants to be left alone. My grandmother swears a curse lies in the bronze." Michael clenched his jaw but said nothing. He knew words would not break superstition. Only truth could. That evening he invited Jonas to climb the tower with him. The blacksmith was reluctant, muttering prayers under his breath as they ascended, but he came. Together they examined every inch of the bell. Jonas ran his thick hands along the rim, tapped the sides with a hammer, even struck the clapper hard. A faint vibration throbbed through the metal, but no sound traveled beyond the bronze. Jonas stepped back pale. "I don't like it, Father. A bell that moves but makes no noise, that's not the work of rust or rope. It's as though the sound itself is trapped inside." Michael frowned. Trapped by what? Jonas shook his head. By whoever marked it. That night Michael could not sleep. He sat in his study, books spread across the table, searching through old texts on symbols, carvings, church records. Hours passed, candle wax dripping onto parchment, until at last he found a reference. The circle and cross symbol, called the wheel broken, was once used by certain sects as a mark of betrayal, a sign carved over graves of those accused of crimes but never tried. It was both a curse and a warning. The dead carry secrets, the living must beware. Michael's blood ran cold. The merchant's grave had borne that mark. And now the bell. The implication was stark. Someone had tied the fate of that dead man to the very heart of the church. Meanwhile, fear in the village thickened. A child fell sick with fever, and the mother wailed that the bell's silence had brought the illness. A cow miscarried, and its owner shouted in the market square that the curse was spreading. Garrick, the old storyteller, seized on these events. "Mark me well," he bellowed before the tavern crowd. "As long as that bell is silent, misfortune will stalk us. We must tear it down before worse comes." A murmur of agreement ran through the villagers. Rage, born of fear, was close to boiling. When word of this reached Michael, he knew time was running out. If the villagers destroyed the bell, whatever truth it carried would be lost. He had to uncover what it was hiding, before the mob acted. The next night, Michael climbed the tower alone. Lantern in one hand, prayer on his lips, he pressed close to the bronze once more. His eyes scoured every curve, every rivet. Then near the base he found something he had missed before. Another carving, faint and nearly erased but still there. Not a symbol this time but letters. He leaned closer. The name was short, jagged, almost gouged into the metal. Elias. Michael's breath caught. Elias was the name of the merchant who had vanished years ago, the same man whose grave bore the wheel broken. Why would his name be inside the church bell? The lantern flickered as a draft swept through the belfry. For a moment, the shadows twisted into shapes, figures that seemed to crouch in the corners, watching. Michael's pulse thundered. He gripped the cross at his neck, forcing himself to whisper, "Deliver us from evil." The shadows shrank, the lantern steadied. But the unease did not leave him. Descending the stairs, he paused halfway and listened. The tower creaked with the night wind, but beneath it, he thought he heard footsteps. Not his own. Slow, deliberate, coming from below. "Peter?" he called, voice echoing. Silence. Lantern raised, he descended, but when he reached the nave, no one was there. The doors were locked from within. He was alone. Or so it seemed. He looked back toward the stairs. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw a shadow linger at the top of the tower, tall, human-shaped, standing beside the silent bell. And then it was gone. Michael did not sleep that night. The bell, the symbols, the name Elias, the whispers of footsteps, it all tangled into a knot of dread. He realized two things with chilling clarity. First, the bell had not fallen silent by chance. Someone had silenced it deliberately, binding its voice with marks of the dead. Second, the truth was older, darker, and far more dangerous than mere superstition. The shadows in the belfry were not only in the tower. They were in the past. And they were creeping steadily into the present. The silence of the bell weighed heavier with each passing day. By the second week, St. Aria felt like a village under siege. Shops opened later, doors shut earlier, and every cough, every stumble was whispered about as a sign of the curse. Some villagers left entirely, fleeing to stay with distant relatives. Others stayed but avoided the church altogether, as though the tower itself had grown poisonous. Father Michael refused to let fear dictate truth. He had seen the carvings. He had seen the name. Elias. The memory of the merchant's burial pressed on him like a stone he could not shake off. Elias had not been a beloved man. Michael remembered him as a traveler with quick eyes and quicker words. He dealt in silks, wines, and foreign trinkets, and though he charmed many, he angered just as many. Whispers had followed him, debts unpaid, deals struck in shadows, a temper that turned harsh when challenged. Then one day he vanished. A week later, his body was found near the river, bloated and bruised as if the water itself had conspired to swallow him. The death had never sat right with Michael even then. But the elders of the parish dismissed questions. He drowned, they had said. The river takes what it will. They had buried Elias quickly, quietly, as if eager to close the matter. Now years later his name was inside the church bell. Carved by hands unknown. Michael could no longer ignore it. He began with the parish archives, dusty shelves of ledgers, birth records, sacramental registers, stacked high in a back room that few ever entered. For 2 nights straight, he sifted through them, his candlelight flickering across faded ink and brittle parchment. At last he found Elias's entry, Elias Marrow, merchant. Buried with rites. Cause of death, drowning. That was all. No mention of the bruises he remembered on the man's neck. No mention of the odd haste of the burial. Just drowning. He turned to the town's death records. Same note, drowning. But in the margins, faintly, almost erased, was a second hand that had scribbled, "Do not inquire further." Michael sat back, heart pounding. Who had written that? And why would a priest, or anyone, add such words to an official record? The next day he visited Martha, an old widow who had been alive when Elias was buried. She was nearly blind now, but her memory was sharp. "Father Michael," she said, her voice cracking like old wood, "why come to me about Elias after all these years?" "I must know the truth," he said softly. "Do you remember his death?" She sighed, folding her hands. "Everyone remembers. Not because he was loved but because he was feared. Elias made enemies. Some say he cheated men out of land. Some say he blackmailed others. There were nights we heard shouting outside his house. Then one day he was gone. When they found him, I saw with my own eyes, bruises round his throat. That was no drowning. That was strangling." Michael leaned forward. "And who saw to the burial?" Martha's lips pressed tight. "The parish elders. Brother Corwin, Deacon Tomas, and the others. They said the less said, the better. They warned us to keep silent. Fear kept our tongues still. And when the bell tolled at his burial, I thought I heard it falter just once. As though it knew." Michael left her cottage with his stomach twisted. If Elias had been murdered, and the elders had hidden it, then the bell's silence was not a curse, it was a reckoning. That night, he confronted Brother Corwin, now a frail man with watery eyes but still sharp in mind. They sat across from each other in the rectory, the candlelight throwing long shadows. "Brother," Michael said, "I need to know the truth. Was Elias murdered?" Corwin's hands trembled on his cane. His eyes darted to the floor. "Why dig at old graves, father? Some truths do more harm than good." "Truth cannot harm more than lies do," Michael replied firmly. "Answer me." The old man's silence was telling. At last he whispered, "Elias brought ruin upon himself. He threatened men of the parish, men of honor. He said he would expose them, shame them before their families, strip their names bare. One night they took him down by the river. They made sure he could never speak again." Michael's breath caught. "And you helped cover it?" Corwin's eyes glistened with tears. "We buried him as a Christian, but we marked him with the wheel broken. A sinner untried, a betrayer unpunished. The mark was carved into his grave. And later it was carved into the bell. A warning. A binding. To keep his name silent." Michael's voice shook with anger. "You defiled God's house to hide a crime." Corwin bowed his head. "I was young. I obeyed the elders. We thought it better than tearing the parish apart." Michael stood, heart pounding with disgust. Silence had been chosen over truth. And now, years later, the silence had come alive, choking the bell itself. The following days brought more unrest. A storm tore through the valley, flattening crops. A barn caught fire after lightning struck. To the villagers, these were not coincidences. "The curse grows," they cried. Garrick stirred the fear further. "This bell binds us to the sins of the dead. Tear it down." Michael knew the mob would act soon. But he also knew the bell's silence was not a curse, it was testimony. It was holding the crime of Elias Marrow in its mute bronze, refusing to ring until justice was named. As he walked through the darkened nave one evening, he felt the silence around him like a heartbeat. Heavy, steady, accusing. The truth was out there, buried in whispers, carved in bronze. But if he spoke it aloud, he would expose not just old men now at death's door, but the very foundation of trust between the church and its people. What was worse? A village living in fear of a curse, or a village living with the knowledge that its faith had been built on a lie? Father Michael lit a candle before the altar, his hand trembling. "Lord," he whispered, "how much truth can the flock bear?" The flame flickered, throwing his shadow across the stone. And in the tower above, the bell remained silent. The days that followed were heavy with unrest. St. Aria no longer felt like a village but like a pot about to boil over. Fear had given way to anger. Farmers muttered in the fields, merchants scowled in the market, and children no longer played near the church. Everywhere Father Michael went, he felt eyes on him. Some were pleading, begging silently for reassurance. Others were suspicious, accusing, as though he himself had bound the curse to the bell. The whispers followed him through the streets. "The priest knows more than he tells. He keeps the truth locked away." By the third week of silence, Garrick had become bolder. He stood in the square, his cracked voice carrying across the cobblestones. "Neighbors, listen. This bell rings for the dead, not for us. It holds secrets. Every day it stays silent, more evil spreads. What else can we do? Tear it down. Burn the tower if we must. God will not save us until we free ourselves from its curse." The crowd cheered, fists raised, fear sharpening into fury. Michael arrived just in time to see stones hurled toward the church wall. He stepped between the mob and the gate, his cassock whipping in the wind. "Enough." His voice thundered, surprising even himself. "You call yourselves faithful, yet you raise hands against the house of God? Shame on you." The mob stilled. Garrick sneered. "Then explain, Father. Why does the bell not ring? Why do children sicken and barns burn? If it is not cursed, then what binds it? Speak." Michael's lips parted, but he could not answer. "Not here. Not yet." The truth was too raw, too dangerous. He steadied his voice. "I will tell you what binds it, but not before Sunday. Come then and you shall hear." The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering, but his promise bought him time. 3 days. 3 days to gather proof, to decide if he dared expose everything. That night he summoned the parish elders. 3 men, all gray-haired now, but once pillars of the church. Deacon Tomas, Brother Corwin, and Master Alric, the former warden of the church's lands. They sat in the rectory, their faces carved from stone. Michael wasted no time. I know the truth of Elias Marrow. He was murdered, his death was hidden, and his name lies carved inside the bell. You were there. Tell me why." A long silence followed. Tomas shifted uncomfortably. Auric's jaw tightened. Corwin, already broken by confession, stared into his lap. At last Auric spoke, his voice hard. "Elias was a danger to us all. He threatened to expose debts, betrayals, sins we carried. If he had lived, families would have been torn apart, the parish disgraced. The men acted to protect Saint Aria." "Protect it?" Michael spat. "By strangling him like a thief in the night? By desecrating God's house with your secret mark?" Tomas slammed a fist on the table, trembling with age and rage. "You speak of desecration, but what of survival? The church is more than walls. It is the people. If they had known the truth, they would have lost faith. Better to carry one lie than to watch the whole parish collapse." Michael's voice lowered, dangerous. "And who gave you the right to decide what truths God's people can bear?" None answered. The silence was damning. Michael leaned forward. "The bell refuses to ring because it will no longer carry your lie. Its silence is your guilt made flesh, and the people suffer for it. You will confess before them on Sunday. All of you." Auric's eyes blazed. "Confess? And shatter the faith of every man, woman, and child? No, we will not." "Then I will," Michael replied. Tomas rose, pointing a gnarled finger. "If you do this, you will ruin everything we built. You will tear the church apart." Michael stood too, towering despite his exhaustion. "The church is not yours to build or to ruin. It belongs to God, and He does not build on lies." The elders left in silence, but their looks promised resistance. Word spread quickly. By morning, half the village knew Father Michael planned to speak on Sunday. Some were eager, desperate for answers. Others were fearful, warning him to leave the past buried. The air itself seemed tense, charged with expectation. Peter, the young sacristan, cornered him after Vespers. "Father, is it true? Did they kill Elias?" Michael placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do you know of Elias, Peter?" "Only that my grandfather told me never to speak his name. He said Elias was trouble." Michael sighed. "Elias was a sinner, yes, but no sin deserves murder. Justice must be spoken, even if it wounds." Peter's eyes widened with both fear and admiration. "Then I'll stand with you, Father, whatever comes." Michael smiled faintly. The boy's loyalty was a spark of hope in a sea of doubt. The night before Sunday, Michael climbed the tower once more. He stood before the silent bell, lantern casting his shadow tall against the walls. The carving stared back at him, the wheel broken, the name Elias. They felt heavier now, as though waiting. He pressed his palm against the cold bronze. "Tomorrow I will tell them," he whispered. "I will not let your silence damn us any longer." The bell, as always, gave no reply. Yet for the first time he thought he felt a faint tremor beneath his hand, a vibration too subtle to be sound but strong enough to be a sign. Perhaps the bell was listening. Sunday dawned gray and heavy with clouds. The church filled to the rafters, every pew occupied, faces tense with expectation. Even those who had sworn never to set foot inside again had come, drawn by curiosity, fear, or the hope of answers. The elders sat in the front row, grim as judges. Garrick leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, daring Michael to speak. The villagers whispered like bees in a hive. Michael stepped to the altar, heart pounding. He looked out at the sea of faces, fearful, angry, desperate. His hands trembled as he opened his mouth. "My brothers and sisters," he began, voice steady though his chest thundered, "today I will tell you why the bell is silent." The church was so silent that Michael could hear the creak of the wooden rafters above. Every eye bore into him, some wide with dread, others narrowed with suspicion. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. He gripped the pulpit, his knuckles white. "For weeks you have demanded to know why the bell does not ring. You've called it cursed, damned it as a bringer of misfortune. But it is not the bell that is cursed. It is us." Gasps rippled through the pews. Garrick barked a laugh. "Us? Do not twist this, priest. Say it plain." Michael drew a steadying breath. 20 years ago, Elias Marrow died in this village. You were told he drowned. That was a lie. He was murdered. His killers walked free and the truth was buried. But it was not buried deep enough. His name is carved upon the bell itself, a mark of guilt hidden where none would dare to look. And now the bell refuses to ring, for the sin it carries was never confessed. The words fell like stones into water. Shock froze the congregation. Whispers swelled into a storm. Murdered? By who? God protect us. The elders shifted in their seats, faces pale but defiant. Deacon Tomas rose, voice trembling with outrage. Lies. Blasphemy. This priest dares to slander the very men who built this church. But Michael's eyes locked on him. You were there, Tomas. You Ulrich Corwin, you all knew. You carried the lie year after year, while Elias's blood cried out for justice. Corwin buried his face in his hands, sobbing. Ulrich stood, red-faced, fists shaking. You would destroy us all with your reckless tongue. We did what had to be done. Elias was dangerous, a threat to families, to order. He would have ruined everything. Better ruined in truth than preserved in murder. Michael roared. His voice echoed off the stone walls and the crowd erupted. Some shouted in rage at the elders. Others cried for silence. Garrick seized the moment, climbing onto a pew. You see, he shouted. Our priest admits it, our leaders are murderers. They betrayed us, cursed us. Tear them down. Tear the bell down with them. The church became a battlefield of voices. Men surged forward. Women cried out. A child screamed. The elders pressed against one another, pale as ash. Michael slammed his fist on the pulpit. Silence. His shout carried like a whip crack. Slowly the uproar dimmed, though it trembled beneath the surface, ready to break again. He continued, voice steadier now. I did not speak this truth to destroy you. I spoke it because lies cannot be the foundation of faith. God does not bless secrets sealed with blood. If we are to heal, the truth must be confessed, openly, wholly, before Him and before one another. He turned to the elders. Will you confess? Here. Now. The silence was suffocating. Tomas's lips tightened. Ulrich shook his head violently. Never. But Corwin, broken by weeks of guilt, rose to his feet. Tears streaked his weathered face. It is true, he said, voice cracking. We killed Elias. We bound his body in the marsh, swore ourselves to silence, and marked the bell so none would forget. I have lived with that weight every day since. The crowd gasped again, but this time the sound was sharp, like the drawing of a blade. Ulrich lunged, grabbing Corwin's arm. You fool. You'll damn us all. But Corwin shook him off. We damned ourselves the night we did it. The people surged again, fury boiling over. Garrick led the cry. Justice. Justice for Elias. Michael raised his arms, desperate. Stop this madness. Justice is not found in vengeance. Let them confess, let them repent. Leave the judgment to God. But the tide was too strong. Men rushed the front, dragging the elders from their seats. Ulrich shouted, Tomas fought, Corwin wept. The crowd became a mob, faith collapsing into chaos. Michael tried to push through, but hands pulled him back. Peter, the sacristan, clung to him. Father, you'll be trampled. Let them? No. Michael shook free. If blood is spilled here, the curse will only deepen. He forced his way to the altar, climbing atop it, arms spread wide. Hear me? Hear me now, he shouted with all his strength. The mob faltered, uncertain. Faces turned toward him again. Michael's chest heaved. You cry for justice, but God's justice is not in your fists. It is in confession and truth brought into light. If we repay murder with murder, the bell will never ring again. Do you want St. Arya damned forever? The words struck them like cold water. Shouts dwindled into murmurs. The mob slowed. The elders stood battered, clothes torn but alive. Corwin fell to his knees before the altar. I confess, he cried. Lord, forgive me. Forgive us all. His wailing filled the church. One by one, other voices joined, not the elders but villagers who had carried their own sins in silence. A woman confessed to theft. A man admitted betrayal. The church became a flood of voices, sins pouring out into the air like smoke from a long-smothered fire. Michael's heart ached as he listened, but also burned with hope. This was the cleansing he had prayed for. He raised his eyes to the tower. Above, unseen, the bell hung in silence. For a moment he thought, hoped, that he felt a tremor in the stones, a whisper in the air. Not a sound yet, but a promise. The truth was finally breaking through. The church still trembled with voices, confessions spilling like rain after drought. Father Michael stood at the altar, chest heaving, eyes lifted toward the silent tower. He prayed without words, a plea born not of ritual but of desperation. Lord, let this be enough. Let truth redeem us. The elders knelt before him, their faces pale masks of defeat. Corwin sobbed openly. Tomas muttered prayers under his breath, his lips trembling. Ulrich stared at the floor, silent but broken. Around them, the villagers' fury had cooled into something heavier, grief, shock, and an ache that pressed on every heart. And still the bell hung mute. A tension wound itself tighter and tighter in Michael's chest. He had believed, no, he had known, that confession would break the silence. But the tower remained still. Had he misread it all? Had God turned his face away from Saint Arya? Then, slowly, he felt it, a vibration beneath his feet, so faint it might have been imagination. The rafters groaned. Dust sifted from the beams. The congregation froze. Heads tilted upward. With a deep, shuddering moan, the bell stirred. Its iron throat opened in a long, low toll that rolled through the church like thunder. The sound was rough, cracked, as if pulled from a long slumber. But it rang. Boom. The floor trembled. Windows rattled. Boom. Tears burst from Michael's eyes. The people fell to their knees, some crying, some laughing. Children clung to their mothers. The elders wept as though struck by blows. Boom. The bell's voice grew clearer, fuller, shedding the rust of silence. It rang again and again, filling every corner of the church, spilling into the village streets, rolling out across the fields and hills. Michael raised his arms. Do you hear it? Do you hear? The curse is broken. Truth has set us free. The crowd erupted in prayer, voices overlapping in a storm of gratitude and awe. Some clutched each other. Others prostrated themselves on the stone floor. Even Garrick, the loudest skeptic, fell silent, his face streaked with tears as he stared up at the tower in wonder. But not all were rejoicing. Ulrich staggered to his feet, shaking his head violently. No, this is not absolution. This is judgment. The bell tolls for us, don't you see? His voice cracked, but the fear in it struck a chord. Whispers spread. Was the ringing a blessing, or a sentence? Michael turned to him. Ulrich, it tolls because we have spoken truth. God's mercy is greater than his wrath. Do not let fear twist what is holy. But Ulrich was beyond reason. He bolted for the doors, shoving past villagers. They parted, uncertain, but did not stop him. He vanished into the night, his footsteps swallowed by the tolling bell. The sound went on, a dozen, 15, 20 strikes until at last it slowed. One final boom rolled through the rafters, then silence returned. Not the heavy, oppressive silence of before, but a stillness clean and pure, like the pause after a storm. The people waited, holding their breath. Then a child's voice whispered, "It's over," and the church exhaled as one. Michael lowered his arms, his body suddenly heavy with exhaustion. He felt both emptied and filled, hollowed out by the struggle but lit from within by something brighter than hope. Faith, not in superstition, not in fear but in truth. He stepped down from the altar, moving among his flock. They touched his robe, his hands weeping. He offered no grand words, only a simple promise. You are forgiven. Live in truth from this day forward. The night passed into dawn. The first rays of sunlight crept through the stained glass, painting the pews in colors of blood and gold. The bell stood high above, silent now, but its voice still echoed in every heart. Epilogue. In the weeks that followed, Saint Arya changed. Secrets that had festered in shadows were dragged into light. Old wounds were confessed, new trust was sown. The elders who survived resigned their seats, replaced by younger men and women chosen by the people themselves. Corwin devoted the rest of his days to penance, tending the poor. Tomas left the village, seeking solitude in a monastery. Ulrich was never seen again. Some whispered he wandered into the marsh where Elias had died, swallowed by the same waters. And the bell? It rang every Sunday once more, clear, solemn, unbroken. Its voice carried not curses but memory. For the people of Saint Arya knew it was not just a call to prayer, but a reminder: truth cannot stay buried. Father Michael often stood beneath it, listening with closed eyes, feeling each toll like a heartbeat. He knew the bell would never be only metal and rope to him again. It was Elias's voice, the voice of justice, the voice of God himself reminding them all. Faith without truth is silence. But faith with truth will always speak. and so the silent bell was silent no more. Thank you for listening, hope you like it, please like and subscribe to more story like this.